Hello, everybody. We are going live. It's been a long time. Just making sure everything is rocking and rolling. Okay, Facebook looks like we're good there. It's been a long time, everybody. Sorry, we had something playing. Let me mute that. If you guys are tuning in, say hello. Love to hear from everyone. Hey, what's up, Robin on Facebook? How's it going? Welcome to the stream. Sorry, it's been a while. Things at work it's been crazy. It's been crazy busy. I don't know if any of you know, but maybe I've said this, I don't know if I have, but I work at the Void. And we just did our grand opening in in Orlando. We did a grand opening for our new Star Wars experience, Secrets of the Empire, which was way cool. And it's a VR experience. You guys should all go do it. Basically, we created this thing where you wear an Oculus and you have a vest and a backpack, and you can go in teams of 4 and basically you are in Star Wars. And I don't want to give anything away, but when you go, you're going on a mission, and this takes place before, what is it? It's before Rogue One is kind of the timeline. And we did a grand opening in Orlando, and we're going to be doing one here in Anaheim. So, so I work at the Void, and I do some visual effects, more on the marketing, I guess, side. But I did a video that plays before the experience, which was really cool. So, go see it. Really cool experience. You guys should all check it out. If you guys are just joining, say hello. I want to know who's here. I want to hear from you guys. And hear how the holidays are going for you. So we're just waiting just a little bit longer, making sure everyone's on. Good. Yeah, so today we're going to be talking about Explosia with the new X Particles 4, because I haven't done a stream in a while. Like I said, it's been busy, so I wanted to do some stuff. Hey, Vincent on YouTube, how's it going? Oh, we got no sound, it looks like, for our friends on YouTube. Let's see if we can fix that for the YouTube friends. They say I don't have any sound. Someone said they have no sound, but I thought I was just hearing. Okay. Okay, yeah, looks like someone's having some troubles on YouTube. Anyway, okay, guys, so I think, oh, hey, Grant on YouTube. Hope you guys are having a good holiday. So yeah, we're going to be talking about Explosia. I've seen a couple of people asking questions of how do they render using Redshift and Explosia, and I want to talk a little bit more about the new Redshift releases, because they've been getting better and better. And I don't know if you guys follow any of the updates for Redshift, but they've been awesome, because it feels like now it's becoming like a live. The IPR window is a lot faster, and it's awesome. So it's getting better. Each release is great. And I wanted to talk about Explosia. So let's start going into it. I'm going to show you just I prepared a little bit more, and I did a quick render and a composite of some stuff in Explosia. So let's jump over to that window. All right, so I'm in After Effects, and here's something I just created with Redshift and Explosia. So this didn't take very long. This was pretty quick, but I thought it looked kind of cool. I don't even know. It's like kind of a large, massive scale, like sim that I did. and just looks cool. And so we're going to show you how we're going to get these kinds of renders out of Redshift, and it's a lot easier than you guys are probably thinking. It took me a bit once I realized what I was doing wrong and right. I was like, okay, it's not too bad. A lot of you probably use Turbulence FD, which is great, but Explosia is pretty amazing, and think I'm gonna switch completely. I don't think I'm gonna use Turbulence FD anymore because it's really powerful, and it can use a lot of modifiers and all those other fun things in Xparticles. So let's jump in. So this was the one I rendered, and we'll just create one from scratch. How about that? So we're gonna create a new project, and let me make this window small for now. And let me make sure we are good with our friends. Francisco on Facebook is wondering if Redshift is better than Octane. There's huge arguments about which one's better, and people prefer either or. I mean, to me, that argument, a lot of people argue that the Red camera is better than the Alexa, even though I think the Alexa is better. But there's huge arguments for both, and it really comes down to what are you good at, what tools do you like, which ones work well with your workflow. On the plus side of Redshift, from what I've researched, is Redshift is built better for production line. So if you're ever looking into getting into bigger production houses, Redshift's probably going to be a safer bet. Octane, I've had it, like, as soon as you get into larger scenes and more complicated scenes, it starts to kind of fall apart. For me, it has. I know other people it hasn't. I know David does some good stuff, and a lot of the other guys do some amazing things with Octane. And I started with Octane, but now I've kind of been converting over to Redshift over time. I think a lot of you will too. All right, so this is Xparticles 4. It's pretty amazing, and they introduced their new Explosia. So you can get here to Explosia this way, right here. And it just creates a bounding box, just like a fluid box, like you'd have in pretty much any, creating any fluid sim. Or you can get to it, I believe, in here. Yep, there it is. So in order for this to work, we need to create an object that can emit smoke and fire and all that jazz. So I'm going to create a sphere. Sorry guys, I'm a little rusty on the live streaming. And then we need to give it a tag. Let me move my mic over. Let me know if you guys are having issues. Sorry, this thing's gonna get loud there for a second. 1 second. Do I dare turn this thing? All right, that's gonna have to do for now. Okay, so what we're gonna do is go into Xparticles, and we're gonna give it a Explosia source. So it's gonna put this little tag on there, on our sphere. And if I click play, immediately, bam, there we go. We already have a sim that is rocking and rolling. And that's pretty sweet. It works really fast. It looks nice. And now we can start messing around with all the fun parts, the fun things about this. So, for example, if we click in the sphere, right now we're not really adding any smoke. So I can crank up this smoke in here, and it's going to add... Later I'll have to show you, but it adds more smoke over the heat. So anyway, what else we can do is pressure. This, I believe, will add more force. So let's go down into, let's look at what's happening. So here is some of the basic parameters. Let me try and make this large enough for you guys to see. All right, so this is our voxel size, and if you turn this up, what's going to happen is it's going to play back a lot faster. It should be playing a lot faster because you don't have as many voxels, and you'll see this grid back here, and those will get bigger the more we turn this up. They'll get smaller if you go down further this way, and the smaller they are, the nicer and smoother it's going to look. So that's how we do that. Now, I don't know all the pieces of this. I'm still learning. So one thing I do know is this container. Right now, when our smoke hits the top, it just kind of clips and it goes away. But if I say Y plus, what this will do is the bounding boxes will more act like a collider. So if I hit play, we're going to see when it hits the edges, it's now going to spread out like as if it's hitting a ceiling. So that's basically what that's going to do. And you can do it on any of these sides, which is really helpful if you don't want to create a ground plane and you know where your smoke wants to hit. So super helpful. I'm going to do negative Y. And the reason why is later we'll show you in simulation that I'm going to have the heat pushed down instead of up. So adaptive size. So this is this square box. Sorry, I'm pointing at my screen. You guys can't see that. Is this yellow box that surrounds our simulation. And if I make this a bit smaller, it's going to be a little bit tighter. But the problem is if you do that too much, it'll start clipping the edges. Or if I believe I make it bigger, let's see which way it goes. Let's turn it 1. See, now this adaptive size is way too big for that sim. So let's go back and just leave it default at 3. And that should give us a bounding box that's good enough where it won't clip. But if you find your sim's moving really fast and it keeps hitting the edge of that, just turn up that adaptive size and it should help you out there. Now I'm just gonna, again, I'm going through this pretty quickly. I'm just kind of showing you guys how to set something up basic that looks nice, and then we're going to dive deeper into how to render it. Sim scale. So you could make this thing, I believe, if it's smaller, yeah, that's a smaller flame. Let me go larger. So that would be, I guess, really big. Let's see, where's that really small? Let's see. Yeah, see, that's like a smaller, that's like a candle, and this is gonna be a larger one. And then there's sim speed. So obviously if you have large simulation, you'd want to move a lot slower and be big. So that feels a lot bigger. But now that problem we're running into where the bounding box is hitting the edges, we would have to fix. So let's try to turn that up to 10 and see if this bounding box moves. Yep. So now it's not gonna hit the edges. And that's a lot bigger and slower moving simulation. Now buoyancy and gravity. So you have gravity. Buoyancy, we can see the smoke is set to -20. The heat is set to 60. But if I turn my heat down to -60 instead of plus, it's now going to push everything down like that. Now I have this big, huge sim. Just feels a lot bigger. And we can do a couple things to make it feel even larger than that. So the other thing is we need to, forces. So I'm quickly going to be going through. So you can turn up smoke diffusion. So if I turn this up a little bit, let me just crank this as the smoke is going to just diffuse and kind of be soft and go away. Or you can turn up your heat diffusion. Dissipation, if I turn this up, you'll see, there we go. Now our smoke's, if it disappears. So if you just want a little bit of smoke and this may be a jet engine or something like that, you can just turn that up right there. So we're just kind of getting hints of the smoke, but not a lot of it. If you go to 0, it's going to fill up the whole thing. So let's go back and set this to like 0.1. So we're still getting some smoke. And again, dissipation works for heat. It works for the fuel. It works for all of those things. So you can mess with all of that. We have a question regarding Explosia compared to Turbulence FD. Is it also GPU accelerated? Yes, I believe it is GPU accelerated, as far as I understand. And I feel like it actually runs a lot faster. I can sim stuff faster in here than I could Turbulence FD. So it is really nice. One second. That was loud. Ooh, that was loud too. So now let's look at some of the forces. So cool thing is You check the wind, force, and if you hit create, now we can actually see our wind. And we can angle it however we want. So I'm going to click play. And now we can see the wind is pushing our smoke sim in one direction, like so. How cool is that? And we can move our wind above like that. And there we go. So we also can increase the strength of the wind. So this will basically make the wind a little bit stronger, like that. So there's a lot we can do with our wind effectors. And another thing we can do is add a turbulence and have curl, which I don't think Turbulence FD had a curl turbulence. So now we can see it's starting to break up and it's looking a little bit nicer. In some places it's falling apart, but that's okay. We can just mess with some of the parameters in here, maybe if it's too much. So there we go. We're getting some nice curl, and it's kind of billowing in different ways. See, that's looking a lot nicer. Let's see if we have any questions. Awesome. Slobo on YouTube says he's excited for the X Particles. Yeah, this is Explosia. You guys all should go check it out. It is really fast and it works very, very well in Cinema 4D. And oh yeah, the other cool thing we can do with this is modifiers. So pretty much any modifier you have in X Particles 4, you can not only use for the particles, but they can be used on Explosia, which is so cool. It's something that I wish Turbulence FD had. So any of these modifiers, I believe, I'll have to double check, but the ones I was messing with do work. So let's try something like, I think a rotate. And all you have to do is drag this rotate into your modifiers. Let's see what this does. So now we're going to see our sim is rotating in this very interesting, wherever the rotator is positioned. Right now it's positioned sideways. So our sim is going to go in that direction. But if I turn this rotator like down, it'll look almost like it's like a tornado or something. So let's sim this. Or maybe it's just spinning it. Oh yeah, it is. It's just gonna spin that. If you look closely, this thing is spinning. And we could crank this thing up. Rotational speed. Speed multiplier. Oh, we may have went too far. We may have crashed it. We'll see. Oh boy. Well, we may have just crashed. Oh, nope, it's back. It's back. We scared it. Let's just not go that intense. Apparently it did not like that. Let's try to resim. Oh, no. So it looks like if you crank up some of your settings a little too hard, it does not like that. Let me see if I can cancel this. I'm going to delete that modifier really quick. See if we can escape that. All right, let me make sure this is still okay. Good. And that's why sometimes it's good to in your voxel size, maybe let's work a little bit bigger voxels at first, so we're just getting the sim, and then we'll turn the voxels down to really to make it look nice. Okay, so again, let's add a modifier. Let's see if we can do a different one. We we did rotate. Let's try a spin, maybe. It doesn't look like, oh, I have to turn like the spin amount. Let's try something else. Let's just try like a, what's it called? Turbulence, where they have wind. So we can add another turbulence in here, which was handy. I can crank up. Oh wait, the reason why it's not working, silly me, is I need to follow my own directions and put this in the modifiers like so. There we go. So now you guys can see that we can add all of these modifiers with Explosia like that. This one's a little too big on the scale size, so we can scale that down nicely. And it's a little too strong, so we can turn that down. But now we have a nice turbulence going on, so it's not as linear. It's broken up a little bit nicer. Then if we go in and we turn our voxels back down to something a little bit nicer looking. There we go. So that's the fun part, is you can mess with the modifiers and get some really cool looking stuff like that's spinning or it's follow path. You can create spline paths that it will follow and does some really cool stuff like that. So I suggest you mess with all the modifiers. Again, maybe when you're doing your sims, work in a little bit bigger voxel size. And once you're happy with the motion, then start turning up your voxels. And when you're ready to cache out your sim, turn the voxels down. It'll look nicer, and then you'll be ready to import that. Let's just see if we have any questions. So yeah, we had a question about caching the simulation before playing in the viewport. So yes, you can cache that, and it's the same way we would cache particles with Xparticles 4, but we would change it to the VDB option, which I will show you. So yes, you can cache these out, which is really nice. So that it'll play back nice and fast for you. And let's look at another part of our Explosia. So we've looked at adaptive size. These are all other attributes you can mess with to see how you like things to dissipate, or the diffusion amount, or the viscosity. And again, a lot of this you just need to kind of experiment with and see what you like, what looks nice, what are you going for, what is the sim for. So there's lots of different things you can use all these little options for. Okay, now let's look at, okay, so advect particles. This is a way to create particles that are in this. So let's say you are trying to do more of a magical kind of effect, and you don't really want smoke looking, you want just like little particles flying around. To do that, all you have to do is create an emitter, and then this emitter you need to select it as, you have to select your Explosia source, which would be this sphere up here. So make sure you go to Object as your emitter and drag this into here. And then in emissions, turn your speed to 0. Let's go back. And for this, I'm going to just hide the Explosia. And now you can see there is our particles being affected by the explosion. However, it is being affected also by this turbulence on top of what's happening with Explosia. So what we need to do is in the Xparticles emitter, in the modifiers, there's a part that says exclude. So you need to drag this in here. So now it should, oh, that did not work. We need to actually turn on Explosia advect particles. So now it will work. So there is our sim that we were creating. And let's just turn up our particles so you guys can see that a lot nicer. Let's try this again. So that is our fluid sim, but in particle forms. Let's even try 100,000 particles. So what you're seeing right there is our fluid sim. Kind of what's happening in there. And that's nice. I mean, you can mess with this parameter and have it look like there's sparks in there, just turning down some of these particles. So every once in a while you're seeing some sparks within your explosions or something like that. So that's just one thing you can do. And if I turn my smoke back on, you can kind of see. But we are not going to do particles. So that's just how that works. In here, just turn that on. And display. So this is another thing that will help you see what your sim is looking like. So if I turn these slices down to 10, you can see that it starts not looking as nice. But if I turn this thing to 100, we're going to start getting a lot more detail. So this is different from your voxel size, and that's important to remember. Your slices, like this is your previewing your display. And if I turn this up, it's going to look a lot nicer, but it may slow things down a little bit more. And the more slices you do, the nicer it'll look in playback. And you can turn your resolution up. I'm not quite sure. I think that smooths out some of those harder areas, so I just turn that up to 150. And you can turn off your sim. You can do slice mode, which is what we were just doing. Grid mode, which is a bunch of little dots. And again, this is just different ways of helping you preview what your sim is looking like. You can check just the center if you want to look at this in a 2D. So basically just as a flat part of it, you can just see just the 2D version of the sim, which is another helpful way. And it just helps you preview what your sim's looking like, how it's moving. So just keep that in mind. If you're really wanting to see what it looks like live, probably slices is the better way to do it. But again, it may slow things down a little bit more. So I can feel like it's already going too slow, but if I went down to 20 slices, now it's going to play back a lot nicer. It just doesn't look as cool, but it plays back a lot faster. So you got to keep that in mind when you are working in these different resolutions. And I want to see what resolution 1. See if I turn the resolution down to 1, now it looks really pixely, but it's going to play back nice. So sometimes messing with those display settings will help you guys fine tune, will help you figure out the way you like to work. And again, I like to work with larger voxels, and then turn it down when I'm going to cache it. Let's see, I'm going to read a couple questions really quick. And we're talking about the upraising the smoke resolution. We kind of talked about that a little bit. McFly on Twitch says, it looks cool. Biggest difference between Turbulence FD and Explosia. Explosia, the nice thing is because it's in tangent, I guess, or works well with X particles, I feel like there's a lot more, you have a lot more control. Again, you can use modifiers. You don't, like, whereas Turbulence FD, you have to put in colliders, or you have to do some pretty tricky things to get a specific look. I feel like in Explosia, because we can use modifiers and follow splines and all those things, you have a lot more control on how your fluid moves. And there's just basic things like curling, and I felt like getting a certain type of curl was a lot harder, whereas in Houdini, you can get curl easy and it works great. Turbulence FD didn't have that, but Explosia does. So there's some differences between the two. I loved Turbulence FD, but I just think they don't do as many large updates. So it's nice that X Particles has Explosion in it now, because now I feel like, okay, this thing will be updated a lot more, and I'm really liking what X Particles has been doing. So I say stick with Explosia in the long run, because there'll be probably more updates and it'll get better. So I'm going to, let me turn my resolution back up to like 80. See, there we go, looking a lot nicer. And the solver, let's just see, if this will even play back at 1.8, which is kind of large. And again, you wouldn't want to do this until you're ready to cache. But you can see just like that, it's looking a lot nicer. I can tell this scale of my turbulence is way too big. If I wanted to make it look a lot smaller, we would do that. And maybe we would want, in the sim, we would want the heat buoyancy to be a lot more intense. So it goes down a little bit harder. It pushes the fluid down. I'm just gonna let this play for a bit so we can look at what's happening. And also, another cool thing is you can emit from this. If I put a texture on this object, you can emit the smoke or fire from a texture. So that's really helpful. If you don't want it to be an entire sphere, you can just do a texture. And let me see if I remember how to do it properly. I believe we just put, let's just throw a quick texture on here, like a noise. And for this example, we're just going to do a really high contrast. Let me turn up the scale a little bit more. Okay. And I believe in here we can say color from shader. Oh, looks like we can just do it in here. We could have added some noise right in here like so. And turn the scale up. Let's try to resim this. It's not quite doing what we want. Let's try it again. See. Okay, I think it is emitting from some spots. You can see it's emitting from here and a couple other spots. Let me see if I just need to, let's see if this will change the outcome. Oh, I guess it's not. Let me make sure I'm doing that right. Interesting. Maybe this is just the color. It's supposed to be like that. I'm not quite sure why that one's not working. I'm wondering if it has to be... No, it's definitely set to the right thing. Interesting. I'll do some more research on that. Figure out why it's not working. Oh, that brings up a good point while we're talking about questions on these types of things. Xparticles has a great help and support. If you go here and go to the video manual, just bring this over. They have a whole bunch of video manuals they came out with when they released Xparticles 4. This thing has saved me so many times when I'm just like, why isn't this working? So you can see they have all these great detailed tutorials on how this all works. So if you have any questions, just go to the video tutorials that they created, and they're super helpful. So next I want to talk about rendering. So now let's just say we did a sim that we were super happy with and it looked awesome. What we can do is that we would cache this out. And when I first did this, I was trying to figure out how to cache this out as an OpenVDB, because I knew that Redshift really likes the OpenVDB. It has a volume object that we can read OpenVDB files. So what you have to do is you need to go, just like you'd cache any of the sims you'd normally have, is you go into your other objects, you click on this, and you go to cache object. Now the next thing you need to do is change it. So its default is Xparticles, but you need to change this to OpenVDB, and that's how you're going to get this to export properly for Redshift. And that's a very important thing you need to remember, because I've had people say, oh, I did the cache and it didn't work. Well, you have to make sure it's actually going out as an open VDB for it to work. So let's just save it here. I'm gonna just maybe we're not gonna do two full. We'll just do it to that frame 63, about where we were at. I think that's gonna be good enough. And you simply hit build cache. So now it's gonna go through and it's gonna cache this sim that we just created and create basically an image sequence of open VDB files. And Redshift will read that in with a volume object. So I'll show you how to do that next. And waiting for this. Again, I could have cranked up the voxel so it looked even nicer. But for now, this is going to work. And I'm going to hide this object just so it's not simming in the background. Maybe I'll even check this off. And what we're going to do is we're going to go to Redshift, Objects, Redshift Volume. Now it's going to ask for a path, and this is where we find our OpenVDB file. So let's go in here. Oh, let me make sure oh, here we go. Here's our files. So you can see it has inside density, fuel, and heat. So those are the sub files, or the files it saves, the information it saves that you can access when you add a Redshift volume material. And I'll show you how to do that. So then we want to make sure animation is on. So right now it's off. Just go simple and hit calculate. And when you first see this, you can see, okay, there's bounding box, so something's happening, but I don't see anything inside. Well, that is because you need to turn on your display settings, and it's off right now. But one moment, let me make sure I'm answering any questions okay, we're good. So, and also I think I did this at 24 frames per second. So let me just re-update that. So in display settings, it says just show bounding box. You can check that on and off. And we need to preview this as either a box, a solid box, or points. And now you can start seeing that in there is these little dots that represent our volume, or our simulation. We only have 10 points. So if I turn this to 100, well, now you can see our simulation like that. And look, I'm scrubbing through this, and it can just play back fine. So we can see there is our simulation. So that's a really nice thing, is you can preview all these as just these little points. And if it gets too heavy, guess what? You can turn it down. And it doesn't matter how many points you have. This is just for display. It's not going to depend on how your render will look. So now we need to create, and we need to make sure we have our everything set up for Redshift. So let's do that. I'm going to turn on my brute force and my irradiance point cloud. I always turn this down a little bit right there. And I'm also going to turn on the automatic memory management. That is just some way for it to help utilize your GPUs a little bit better. It's a bunch of stuff I don't understand. Bucket rendering, I usually turn this up a little bit too. It can be a bit bigger, and that's fine. And these are just ways of speeding up your render. And my unified sampling, I'm going to turn this to 16, and this one will do just to 80 for now. And we'll do motion blur after as well. So we have that set up. Now we need a Redshift area light. Let me just move this thing around. So here's our Redshift area light. And with the area light, we need to make sure, and I say this over and over, make sure that your area light and all of your lights, if you want them to affect any volumes, whether it's fog, explosions, make sure its contributing scale is on. It depends on where you want it, but I'm going to put this one to 1, but make sure that is happening. If it's not, you're not going to see your render. And I've had several people say, why can't I see my render? I said, make sure your contribution scale is up to 1 or something. That way you can see your render. Now, if I hit render now, we still will not see this. So I'll just show you. There'll be nothing here. So we see nothing. And that's because we need to give this volume object a material. Sorry, my brain just didn't work for a second. So we'll do volume, and we'll drag this onto the Redshift volume. And now, as we saw on this object, we have density, fuel, and heat. So we have those three things we can use to drive our material. And so for scattering, which is typically smoke, we want to use the density. So if I type density, I'm going to hit render for you and show you what happens. Well, there it is. Now we are able to see our smoke. And if I turn up, let's see if I can refresh this. Feels like my light is actually on the opposite side, which is really confusing. So we can see now we have a volume we can preview. There it is. And the coolest thing is you can actually play this back in live. I mean, I'm streaming while I have After Effects open, which is using some of my computer CPUs and GPUs, and I'm able to play back this fluid sim. And you can see the preview window for Redshift. I'm going to make this thing a lot larger so you guys can see. The preview window has gotten a lot faster. Look at this. That's me live moving around and previewing a fluid sim, which is awesome. So if I hit play, you can see this whole sim happen. If I scrub through, it does a decent job keeping up. So now we can finally see our smoke. Now, if we had fire in here, what we need to add in here is one of the other two names, either fuel or heat. And I'll show you each of them. So here's fuel. Let me refresh the render. So there is our fuel. And if you toggle this little triangle down, you can do load preset, and they have a heat preset. So we'll just grab one of these like that. So the heat, I believe, has a lot more going on. It travels a lot more through the sim. But if I just want it a little more subtle, maybe we'll just use the fuel windows. I can't remember, but heat has more. Let's refresh this. Yeah, see, the heat, it's going to be throughout the entire sim. But if I just do fuel, that's typically what I like to use. Now, the next thing we need to do is mess with some of these parameters. And we can see, if I turn up my absorption coefficient, you can see how much of the between the fuel or the fire and the smoke we want to see is by messing with that. And the cool thing is that the spline down here, and if you hit control and click, you'll make a dot, and you can really fine tune what you want a little more transparent, what part of the smoke you want a little more thick, and you can draw like so. It's just a really helpful way of making your explosions or whatever be your own. And you can turn down the scale or the intensity of the fire right here. The scatter coefficient, you can crank this up. This is, I believe, how much it is affected by light. So it's going to scatter that. If we still want this to be up a little bit brighter, we can do that. And then in our advanced parameters, we have the emission advanced parameters and the density. So we can turn this down so it's a little thicker, the smoke, or it's a little thinner smoke, just like that. So it falls off a little bit nicer. And the same goes with our emissions or fire. So you can just mess with these parameters and kind of fine tune and see what looks best to you. Maybe like those little hot spots down there. Again, I didn't even crank up some of my settings very high for this, but it still looks pretty good. Let me just back like that. I think that looks pretty cool. There's a couple other things I would do with color. Mess with some of this color shift in here. Sometimes I don't like this thing being so saturated. So we could turn all that down if it's a little too saturated. And another thing is you need to be making sure every time you make a change with the material, you'll need to re-update the IPR window, which, you know, maybe they'll fix that in the future releases. But for now, I still think it does a really, really good job. Let's see how that looks. So the next thing is when you render these out, I wanted to show you guys how I render it out into different passes so I have more control. Really quick, there's just one thing I wanted to mess with. It's a little bit more of how this fire is looking and where it's traveling. I feel like the smoke is a little too thick, so we could thin it out. But when you thin it out, then my fire gets really bright, so we could maybe turn down the scale. This is a little softer in between. And again, just mess with these and you can do some really cool looking stuff pretty quick. You know, something like that for now. It's gonna work. My light's a little bright as well. So again, we did this pretty quickly. And it can play back nice. So there's tons of different things you can do to make this look really cool. Just checking if we have any more questions. We're looking like good. So now let's talk about the rendering side of things. Let me pause this. And in the new AOVs or multipass settings, we can, before you had to go down into here and we had to like check a bunch of things. They're really annoying. Now we don't have to. You can click on multi-part EXR, go show AOV manager, and basically we can go, you know what we need? We need all the volume settings. Drag these in here. They're checked and they're good. And if we do a quick render, if I just click on this button right here, we're going to see what our final render will look like. And there's a couple of things I don't like. See how it's super noisy right there? That means we need to turn up our samples a little bit more. And I'm actually going to fix the bucket rendering. I'm going to turn that a little bit smaller. I'm going to go back to that. And we're going to turn this up to 150 in our adaptive error threshold. I'm going to turn this smaller. Let me see on my filter size. This is how blurry. I'm going to do this 1.5. Let's try that again and see if we get rid of some of that noise. It cleaned up a little bit. We could even turn it up even more if we wanted. The other thing you can do is make sure that your override samples in the volume, we can scale them by 2. Let's see if that helps as well. Let's try this again. Still not quite there. We'll try 250. It may slow it down a little bit, but this is going pretty quick. Yeah, it's cleaned up really nicely in there. So once we have a render that we're happy with, the cool thing is now we can look at each of our passes. So there's the emission. So that's just the fire. So if we wanted the glow only where the fire was and not having our little clouds all glowy, then we could do that. There's the fog tint and the lighting. So that's the basically like the how the smoke looks. Nullify says light samples and volume samples add GI. So maybe we'll add some GI. I thought I had my brute force. Brute force is on. Maybe we need to turn our light photon GIs on. Crank that up. Let's see how that's looking. Not noticing too much of a difference. I have my global illumination on. Let's see if I crank that up really high. Yeah, I'm not noticing too big of a difference with my light having some GI in there. I mean, we could add a dome light, because right now we're just working with one. So let's find a HDRI that we like. Let's go here. And maybe we'll just use one of these. No, that did not like that. Oops, doesn't like the DDS. Let's try this. One second, guys. Let me make sure this is reading the proper. There they are. That's why. Sorry about that. GI samples. Like the number of bounces. If we went crazy and went that one a little bit higher. Nullify is trying to teach me how to get my samples right. Hopefully I'm doing this. I thought I had that right, but yeah, the weird thing is I'm not getting a ton of global illumination on my volume right now. And if I check all my settings, I definitely have GI on. The last thing I was going to show you guys are the samples on the light. What if we went 250? So weird thing is I'm not getting a ton of effect from my dome light, which is actually really surprising to me. So maybe that is something that we'll have to do some research, because I definitely have GI turned on. It's just not affecting it as much as I thought it would. So we'll do a little bit more research on GI and volumes. Oh, volume contribution. Guys, I did not follow my own advice on that one. Oh boy. That's okay. There we go. So yeah, just make sure that your volume contribution is on, and your samples. That's probably a lot of it too. Is make sure you have your samples cranked up. We're gonna really crank them up right there. And we'll hit render. Thank you, Nullify. I definitely missed that for a second, wondering why my dome wasn't affecting. Realized that the volume contribution wasn't on. The thing that I was saying that you have to do. So, like I was going to say, the nice thing is you can do motion blur on this, and you can break this out into different lighting, your volume emissions and lighting, and that will help you. And we're going to jump over into After Effects really quick, and I'm going to show you guys how I composite these and little tricks and tips for you. So yeah, again, we can see our emission and our lighting, and that's kind of a nice way to blend all these together. So let's jump over to, well, I guess the last thing is I didn't really talk much about motion blur, but you can check this on, and it will give you motion blur on your volumes. And you just gotta make sure your steps are high enough so there's not steps between. So, but make sure it's your volumes are moving fast enough. Otherwise, I don't think it will really work. Let's see if we can get this thing to give us a good example. I'll turn this up to 5. And I believe we need to do a full render if it's going to work. It's hard to tell because it's kind of a soft sim, but I think the motion blur is on. It's just a little bit softer. So we'd have to see an example, something moving really, really fast for it to work. But anyway, so there's your emissions, your lighting, your beauty. All right, let's jump over into After Effects. I'm going to show you how I kind of composite these things and how I work with AOVs. So here we are. And here's the composite I created really quick with the other sim. Those of you that haven't seen it yet. Using those same techniques, this is like a lot larger scale looking sim. But some of the things that help me, I will show you guys. So make sure all of you have the OpenEXR plugin, and let me find that for you guys. Let's see, OpenEXR. I think it's called Pro EXR. Oh, sorry about that. Pro EXR. Yes. Okay, guys. If you're using EXRs, which I believe you should be, just helps you, it breaks up all of your AOVs so that you can use them and access them. Go download this. It's free. It's for After Effects, Premiere, and all that good stuff. Photoshop. It will help you break up your EXR. So when I import my EXR, so here was the original EXR sequence. And this one did have motion blur on it as well. Go into File, and you can go Create Pro EXR Layer Comps. Let me just do that again for you. Let's see. Okay, there's our contact sheet. This shows us all of the layers that are available, which can be really helpful. And then you're gonna have, let's go into our main assembly. So in here, you're gonna see the assembly of how this thing comes together. And let me make sure, sorry guys, a couple notifications. So now we can look at, here's our explosion. This is the beauty pass, the RGBA one. You can solo that. And it should even have an alpha, which is really helpful. So that's the beauty pass. And then we have, this is our, which one is this? This looks like the lighting one. It's gonna be a little bit darker, but that's okay. Here's our alpha, volume light, which we didn't really have any lights in our volumes. And then we have our emissions, which is that fiery looking stuff. So I'm gonna hide the beauty pass, and I'm gonna hide the alpha and the tint. We're just gonna be working with the lighting and the emissions. So let me turn this back on. Yeah, extractor Dom Amateur on YouTube says, yeah, the extractor AE default does the same thing. It does, but you have to shuffle them out yourself. and I would prefer just to have a plugin that breaks it up for you. It's a lot more, it speeds up your workflow. So I just suggest doing that. So anyway, if I put my mission above my lighting, so we can see there's our fire. And one of the things that I notice is it's very saturated when it comes out of any, I mean, out of Turbulence FD, out of Houdini, and you can mess with it in there with the gradients, but sometimes it's easier just to do it in post. So I use the tritone technique, which I learned from Ben Watts, and all it's doing is it replaces your highlights, your midtones, and your shadows with these colors. And if I blend between the two, you'll see that that's it just kind of brings it down a bit. It looks a lot more realistic. And the nice thing is, because we're just working on our emissions or our fire, if I do a glow, the Real Glow plugin, which I really like, now we're just going to affect that. And I can split the difference with this tritone if I like it a little bit warmer in there, which I think that looks pretty nice. Let me put this at half resolution so we can play this through this thing a little bit quicker. So now I feel like that, let me go to a frame that looks nice. I wish we could play through this thing a little bit quicker. I feel like with that was before and that's after. I believe that looks a lot more realistic and a lot more believable. Let's have something like that. Then the other nice thing is you can do a levels. And in here we can start messing with just the lighting of our smoke. So these are separate, which is really helpful when you're trying to composite something and maybe your smoke's too bright, and if you mess with that, then it's going to mess with your fire, and you can't have as much dynamic range. You can't really fine tune the look of your explosion. So I suggest rendering these out in AOV passes, bring them back into After Effects, Nuke, whatever you're using, and doing it this way. You have a lot more control, and I think that's really important, because you can take even a basic and an okay looking sim that's not maybe rendered exactly the way you want, and you can make it look really good in a post. If you have them broken up, you can do a lot to sweeten it. There's even other things that sometimes I do, like duplicating my emissions. Let's see if this will work the way I'm thinking it will. I'm thinking, sometimes I think in Nuke terms, so we'll see if this works the way I'm imagining. Right, okay, this is. Let me solo this. So we could create like let's create a really contrasty noise pattern. Scale it down around there, that's pretty good. And let me duplicate this one again. Sorry guys, it gets a little confusing, but I'm going to show you something that helps. Then I will do this as a Luma mat. So now that noise is just in that area. And if I bring all this down here, let's take a look. Let me make sure this Real Glow. Oh, I know what we need to do. Sorry guys, I need to pre-compose this. Let me delete that. So I have that. Let me just, and I would animate this noise, of course. But for now, I'm just going to pre-compose this. And we would screen this on top of our other layers. Then we do something like a Real Glow. And maybe we have the radius of this one really small, but we have it intense, really intense in areas. And what it's going to do is give you some cool oops. It's going to give you a little more detail in there. And obviously I would go in here and make sure that this noise, you could duplicate this again and have this noise on the same color. So if we did that, unsolo that. So this one would we pre-compose this again. This would be a little bit easier in Nuke. That's okay. So there we go. So now we're getting, oh boy, sorry guys. So now you're getting some of that noise with the same color. And there's some things you could do with that. I would animate this, maybe moving the same direction, same speed. And it just, you could add these like little hits of light broken up. But there's a lot you could do in here. Let me, if we go back into this pre-comp, turn up the contrast and maybe the scale a little bit. There's some fun things you can do. Just helps you kind of add more detail in your shots. And you can just layer these things together to give you more detail. Someone's asking about Real Glow. Real Glow is a plugin. I believe it's on AE scripts, and it does really nice looking glows. So I always use Real Glow. Shout out to Real Glow. Yeah, it's really good. Then the other thing I like to do is do like a sharpen. So we could add a sharpen on here. And that's already looking a lot nicer. So we took something that, and I'll maybe toggle between the two, something that looked, you know, it looked decent, didn't look bad, and we really bumped it up here in compositing. And that's what I talk a lot about in my my crash course is how compositing we can make something that looks good in a render, and then it looks amazing in a composite. And you'll see that a lot even in productions. You'll see some breakdowns of films and you're like, oh, that render didn't look too crazy, and then the compositors touch it and it looks amazing. So it's just really helpful to know some techniques in compositing, whether you do, you know, you're a 3D guy or anything. Knowing some compositing basics will help you guys quite a bit. This sim isn't the best, but it looks pretty cool. So that's some basic techniques with the compositing side of things here in After Effects, and maybe in the future we'll do some stuff with in Nuke, because I've been primarily using Nuke at work, and so eventually I'll start doing some stuff with that. Before we start wrapping things up, I wanted to know if there are any questions or things that I could answer for you guys before I give you a discount code for New Year's. So, yeah, if you guys have any questions, looks like John Priest on Facebook was working Explosia today. Awesome, John Priest. Nice to meet you. Hope it was going well. I hope this was helpful for you guys. Hopefully we answered some questions, gave you some cool tips, some things to help you guys out. Oh, also, quick side note. If you combine the power of real explosions, real stock explosions, and Explosia, you can get some really, really cool looking stuff, and something that doesn't look like everyone else's, because you'll see someone using the same type of plugins over and over and over, and you'll recognize it. But if you use our Ultimate Explosions pack, these 4K, 5K, 6K explosions, and you use them not just in your scenes, but you can use them as references as to how explosions work. And this can help you really dial in your simulations. So even if you're using these as references, they're very helpful. And then you use this combined with the simulations you guys create, you can make some stunning looking stuff, and it can really be your own, and you guys can be as creative as you want. So we're doing a 20% off New Year's discount code, and tomorrow the email will go out. So if you're subscribed to us, you can be notified. But since you guys all tuned in to the live stream today, the discount code is New Year's 18. So it's all lowercase, New Year's 18, because you guys tuned in. So that's 20% off everything that we have except for the VFX Starter Pack. So this VFX bundles, 4K Storm, flares, Ultimate Explosions, fireworks, all 20% off. And so go check that out and use that code. Hopefully that will help you guys in your next projects in 2018. And again, if you guys have questions, feel free to, email me, shoot me a message on Facebook, follow us, our Facebook group, and our Facebook page, VFX Central. And I believe that's all the things. So thank you guys for tuning in. I really appreciate all the questions and helping me kind of get through some of these things. I was a little rusty. It's been a minute. And I hope you guys have a great New Year. Happy New Year, everyone. And we will talk to you guys later. Bye.